The empty chair. The mahogany courtroom fell silent as Judge Harrison's gavel echoed through the packed chamber. Camera flashes flickered like lightning as reporters leaned forward, their pens poised over notepads. This was the divorce trial everyone had been waiting for. Tech billionaire David Sterling versus his supermodel wife, Isabella. David sat rigid in his perfectly tailored Armani suit, his steel gray eyes fixed on the empty chair beside Isabella's attorney. His jaw clenched as whispers rippled through the gallery behind him. Where was she? "Your Honor," stammered Isabella's young lawyer, Sarah Chen, her voice barely audible above the courtroom's tension. I haven't been able to reach my client since yesterday evening. This is completely out of character." Judge Harrison's weathered face showed his displeasure. "Mr. Sterling's attorney, do you have any knowledge of Mrs. Sterling's whereabouts?" Marcus Kane, David's silver-haired legal shark, stood with practiced grace. "None whatsoever, Your Honor. My client is as perplexed as the court. We've been preparing for this settlement for months." Settlement. The word tasted bitter in David's mouth. After 8 years of marriage, it had come to this, dividing assets like poker chips, splitting their empire down the middle. Isabella wanted half of everything: his tech company, Cinertech, their Manhattan penthouse, the house in the Hamptons, even his prized collection of vintage guitars. But where was she? David's mind raced back to their last conversation 3 weeks ago. They'd stood in the marble foyer of their penthouse, the same space where they'd shared their first dance as newlyweds. Isabella had been different, distant, her emerald eyes holding secrets he couldn't decipher. "You'll regret this, David," she'd whispered, her voice carrying an odd finality. "You think you know me, but you don't know me at all." He'd dismissed it as dramatic posturing. Isabella had always been theatrical. It's what made her such a captivating model, such a magnetic presence at their charity galas. But now, staring at her empty chair, those words felt prophetic. "Your Honor," Judge Harrison announced, his patience wearing thin. "If Mrs. Sterling doesn't appear within the next 30 minutes, I'll have no choice but to rule in favor of Mr. Sterling's counter-petition for dismissal." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. David felt his attorney's hand on his shoulder, a gesture meant to be reassuring, but it only heightened his unease. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Isabella Sterling wasn't just beautiful, she was brilliant. She'd graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School before her modeling career took off. She was methodical, punctual, never left anything to chance. For her to simply not show up to the most important legal proceeding of their lives was impossible. Unless David's blood ran cold as a horrifying thought crept into his mind. What if something had happened to her? What if she'd been in an accident, or worse? Despite everything, the lawyers, the accusations, the media circus, he still cared about her. Beneath all the hurt and anger, love still flickered like a stubborn flame that refused to die. The courtroom doors creaked open, and every head turned. But it wasn't Isabella. It was Bailiff Rodriguez, his usually calm demeanor replaced by visible tension. He walked directly to the judge's bench, whispered something urgent, then turned toward David. "Mr. Sterling," the bailiff called out, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "I have something for you." David's heart hammered against his ribs as he stood. The bailiff approached, holding a cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax, Isabella's signature touch. Her elegant handwriting spelled out his name across the front. "This was delivered to the courthouse this morning," Rodriguez explained, quietly, with specific instructions to give it to you only if Mrs. Sterling failed to appear. David's hands trembled as he accepted the envelope. The entire courtroom held its collective breath. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as he broke the wax seal, unfolded the letter, and began to read. His face went ashen, His hands shook. And then, to everyone's shock, tears began streaming down the face of the man Forbes had called the Ice King of Silicon Valley. What could Isabella have written to reduce this powerful billionaire to tears in front of the entire world? The silence in the courtroom was deafening as David Sterling's tears fell onto Isabella's letter. His hands shook so violently that Marcus Kane had to steady his arm. The man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching was completely undone. "David," Judge Harrison said gently, his stern facade cracking with concern. "Do you need a recess?" David couldn't speak. He could barely breathe. The words on the elegant stationery swam before his eyes, each sentence a dagger to his heart. "My dearest David, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't face you in that courtroom. Not because I'm a coward, but because seeing your face would have broken my resolve to do what I must. You want to know why I'm asking for half of everything? It's not greed, my love, it's justice. 3 years ago, when you were in Tokyo closing the Yamamoto deal, I discovered something that shattered my world. Hidden in your private study, behind the false panel you thought I'd never find, were documents that revealed the truth about Sinner Tech." David's blood turned to ice. She couldn't. No one knew. The revolutionary software that made you billions, the AI algorithm that revolutionized social media, it wasn't yours, David. It belonged to my brother. The courtroom began to spin around David. Michael Chen, Isabella's brilliant younger brother who had died in a car accident 5 years ago. The same Michael who had been David's roommate at MIT, his closest friend, his coding partner. Michael trusted you with everything, his ideas, his code, his dreams of changing the world. When he died, you didn't just grieve with me. You stole from him. You took his life's work and built an empire on his grave. Mr. Sterling? The judge's voice seemed to come from underwater. "Sir, are you all right?" David's lawyer grabbed the letter, scanning it quickly. His face went white as he read further. The patents, the original code, the design documents. They're all in Michael's handwriting. I have copies of everything, David. Every email where he shared his breakthrough with you. Every late night conversation you recorded on your phone when he was explaining his theories. I've spent 3 years building a case, working with forensic computer experts, hiring investigators. The half of your fortune I'm demanding? It belongs to Michael's estate. It belongs to the family whose genius you exploited. Marcus Kane's hand flew to his chest. This wasn't just a divorce. It was corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property on a massive scale. If Isabella could prove her claims, David wouldn't just lose half his fortune. He'd lose everything. He'd face criminal charges. But here's the twist, my darling husband. The letter continued. I fell in love with you anyway. Despite knowing what you'd done, despite the lies, despite the betrayal, I stayed because I hoped the man I married was still somewhere inside the thief you'd become. Tears streamed down David's face as he took back the letter with shaking hands. I gave you 8 years to confess, 8 years to do the right thing, to honor Michael's memory. Instead, you built monuments to your own greatness while his parents struggled to pay for his funeral. The courtroom was now buzzing with confusion and speculation. Reporters were frantically taking notes, though they couldn't hear the letter's contents. All they could see was one of the most powerful men in America completely breaking down. I'm not coming to court, David, because this isn't about money. It's about truth. By the time you read this, copies of all evidence have been delivered to the SEC, the FBI, and every major tech journalist in the country. The story breaks at noon. David glanced at the courtroom clock. 11:47 a.m. You have 13 minutes before the world learns that the Sterling Empire was built on stolen dreams. I know you'll hate me for this, but someone had to speak for Michael. Someone had to make sure his genius wasn't buried with him. I loved you, David. I loved the man you were before greed consumed your soul. Maybe in prison you'll find him again. Forever yours in truth, Isabella P.S. I'm not taking half your fortune to hurt you. I'm donating every penny to the Michael Chen Foundation for Young Inventors. He would have wanted his legacy to inspire others. David's legs gave out. He collapsed into his chair as the full magnitude of Isabella's revenge hit him. She hadn't. Just left him. She'd destroyed him with surgical precision, using his own love for her as the weapon. Marcus Kane was already on his phone, frantically calling damage control specialists. But they all knew it was too late. In 13 minutes, no, 11 minutes now, David Sterling's world would explode. The man who had everything was about to lose it all, and the woman he'd underestimated had orchestrated the most brilliant takedown in corporate history. But was Isabella telling the whole truth? Or was there an even darker secret waiting to be revealed? The courtroom clock read 11:58 a.m. 2 minutes until Isabella's bombshell hit the world. David Sterling sat motionless, Isabella's letter crumpled in his white-knuckled fist, his empire crumbling around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. Marcus Kane was frantically making calls, his usually composed demeanor shattered. "Get me the crisis management team now," he hissed into his phone, "and find out if we can get an injunction." "It's too late," David whispered, his voice hollow as a tomb. For the first time in his life, the man who had built a fortune by staying 3 steps ahead of everyone was completely, utterly defeated. But then something shifted in David's eyes. A spark of the ruthless intelligence that had made him billions flickered back to life. He stood slowly, his movements precise and calculated despite his emotional devastation. "Marcus," he said quietly, his voice gaining strength. "Cancel those calls." "David, we need to—" "Cancel them." The command cut through the courtroom noise like a blade. David Sterling was down, but he wasn't out. Not yet. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, stopping at a name that made his blood run cold. Detective Sarah Morrison, NYPD. Isabella's best friend since college. The same Sarah who had been at their wedding, who had been Isabella's confidant through their entire marriage. With trembling fingers, David opened his photo gallery and found what he was looking for. A picture from 3 years ago, the same time Isabella claimed she'd discovered his secret. In the photo, Sarah Morrison was coming out of a hotel with a man who wasn't her husband, a man David recognized as Vincent Torres, a known arms dealer, with connections to international crime syndicates. David had taken this photo by accident during a business lunch, never thinking much of it. Until now. But there was more. Much more. His mind raced back to conversations, seemingly innocent moments that now took on sinister new meaning. Sarah had always been asking questions about his business, about Synertech's security protocols, about his travel schedule. And Isabella? Isabella had always been so curious about his work, so supportive, so eager to help him organize his files. The truth hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just about Michael's stolen technology. This was something much bigger, much more dangerous. 59 a.m., David's fingers flew across his phone screen, accessing encrypted files he hadn't touched in years. Bank records, transaction histories, communication logs, all the digital breadcrumbs of his carefully hidden secondary business operations. Because the truth was, Synertech wasn't just a tech company, it was a front for something much more, lucrative and infinitely more illegal. David Sterling wasn't just a thief. He was a money launderer for some of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the world, and Isabella knew it all. The courtroom doors burst open with explosive force. Federal agents in black tactical gear flooded in, their weapons drawn, their faces hidden behind masks. "FBI, nobody move!" Screams erupted from the gallery as reporters dove for cover. Judge Harrison's gavel fell uselessly as chaos consumed his courtroom. The lead agent, a tall woman with steel gray hair, strode directly to David's table. "David Sterling, you're under arrest for corporate espionage, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and terrorism financing." The words fell like hammer, blows as she slapped handcuffs on his wrists. "You have the right to remain silent." But David was already talking, his voice cutting through the pandemonium. "Agent Martinez," he said, recognizing the woman from intelligence briefings he should never have had access to. "Before you take me away, you need to know something about your star witness." Agent Martinez paused, her professional mask slipping slightly. How did he know her name? "Your operation isn't about justice for a dead programmer," David continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "It's about covering up something much bigger. Detective Sarah Morrison has been feeding information to Vincent Torres for 3 years. And Isabella isn't just a grieving sister seeking justice." He turned to face the courtroom cameras, knowing this was his only chance to control the narrative. "Isabella Sterling is a federal informant who's been playing both sides. She married me on orders from the FBI to get inside my organization. But she got greedy. She started skimming money from the very operation she was supposed to be documenting." The courtroom fell silent except for the clicking of cameras. Agent Martinez's face had gone pale. "Michael Chen didn't die in a car accident," David said, his voice now carrying across the entire courtroom. "He was murdered because he discovered that his sister was using his technology to create backdoors for federal surveillance programs that certain criminal organizations were very interested in purchasing." The blood drained from Agent Martinez's face. This wasn't possible. Their investigation had been airtight, compartmentalized, need to know only. How could David Sterling, a target of their operation, know about classified federal programs? "Check Agent Martinez's phone," David called out to the other FBI agents. "Check her text messages from this morning. You'll find communications with someone using the code name Phoenix. Someone who's been feeding her information about your investigation." Agent Martinez instinctively reached for her phone, but David's words had already planted seeds of doubt in her team's minds. The other agents were looking at each other with growing suspicion. "Isabella disappeared yesterday because she discovered that Agent Martinez was planning to eliminate her once this operation concluded," David continued. "She wasn't supposed to survive the takedown. A tragic accident, a suicide driven by guilt. The story was already written." "He's lying!" Agent Martinez shouted, but her voice cracked with panic. "He's a master manipulator trying to save himself." "Then explain this," David said, somehow producing a small recording device from his jacket, despite being handcuffed. How? He'd managed to activate it, unnoticed was anyone's guess, but David Sterling had always been full of surprises. A voice filled the courtroom, Agent Martinez's voice. "The Sterling operation has to be clean. No witnesses, no loose ends. The informant knows too much about Phoenix protocol. Make it look like the stress got to her." The federal agents all turned to stare at their leader, weapons subtly shifting direction. Agent Martinez's career, her freedom, possibly her life, hung in the balance of the next few seconds. "You recorded me," she whispered, her face a mask of barely controlled rage and fear. "I record everyone," David replied coldly. "It's how I stayed alive in this business for so long. Isabella taught me that trust is a luxury I couldn't afford." But even as David played his trump card, even as he watched the federal operation crumble, around him a darker truth gnawed at his consciousness. Because Isabella's letter had contained one more secret, one final revelation that he hadn't shared with anyone. In the envelope, beneath her devastating letter, had been a single photograph. A picture of Isabella holding a child. A little girl with David's piercing blue eyes and Isabella's golden hair. On the back, in Isabella's handwriting, "Emma Sterling Chen, age 3. Your daughter David, the one you never knew about because I couldn't trust you with an innocent life." David had a daughter who was now in hiding with a mother. The FBI wanted dead, and a father they wanted in prison for life. As the federal agents turned their weapons on their own leader, as reporters frantically live-streamed the courtroom, chaos to millions of viewers worldwide, as Judge Harrison desperately tried to restore order, David Sterling realized that this wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning of the most dangerous game he'd ever played. A game where the stakes weren't money or power or even freedom. The stakes were the life of a child he'd never met, and a woman he'd never stopped loving, despite everything she'd done to destroy him. And somewhere in the chaos, David Sterling smiled. Because he finally understood Isabella's real plan. She hadn't come to court to destroy him, she'd come to save him. But where is Isabella now? And what other deadly secrets are hidden in the Sterling Empire? The most shocking revelations are yet to come.